Do we need our illustrious AD? Oh, I was supposed to do something for the change in ADs, wasn't I?
Yeah, don't worry about it. I was going to send Mary some money. I was going to send Mary some money and some instructions. Ben's not our IDs. Now Adam goes. Give him a ride somewhere. I'll give him a bottle of Montezuma. I think it costs $5.
But the revenge is priceless.
He did drink quite a lot of that. There was one occasion. Oh, and a bottle of Gatorade. He was making ghetto margaritas. His lemon lime and Gatorade. Montezuma rum. Together. The cheapest, most disgusting stuff.
That architecture question to discuss about the DNS resolution for clients attempting to pass a capture portal that are using DOT, DOH, DO something that is somehow perhaps magically permitted. I mean, if they're in a capture portal passing phase, they really ought to use the network assigned DNS servers. Because on the basis that actually capture portals often contain host names that don't
resolve.
Oh, yeah.
That's the Verizon problem.
Thank you.
An issue in the application document. Everyone needs a no issue.
Oh yeah, it's a way of feeling included.
It's time.
Are we waiting for Adam? Or are we gonna?
Adam lost his opportunity. He'll catch up.
All right. I guess we'll get underway. Welcome to Capport. If this is, if you're here for something else, you can stay, but might not be what you expect. Please note well the things that are worth noting well, which is all of it. You should have seen this many times before by now. Let's see. We have a, Patrick, thank you for taking minutes. Do we have a Jabber scribe? Do we have anybody on Jabber?
Oh, look, Ted. Ted did that. There you go. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Ted. While we're in TCP slow start, does anybody have agenda bashing? Nope. Welcome, welcome. Here's some blue sheets. Smells like what? Oh.
New cologne. Yeah.
No updates to the agenda? Already?
Oh, yeah. I'll do that after we talk about the other business. Oh, so, have you already told them you're returning? Okay. So before we start, I wanted to point out that I will be handing this working group off to Barry this evening
on the plenary stage. So this is your new area director. Say hello to Barry.
Hello, Barry.
I don't love y'all. I just have other things I need to take on instead.
Truly noted.
Well, Barry said that he has like a special place in his heart. This person he started.
That I chartered, that you guys started it.
There should be blue sheets somewhere. Please, we need to start another second sheet. Does somebody know where the blue sheets are? At the very back. You might want to sign. Oh, let's just go back. There's still people filing in. Welcome to Captive Portals. You should have seen this note well before. Please note it well. Any questions? Blue sheets, agenda bashing. Yeah, it's a remarkably full room.
A lot of blue sheets, please.
Alrighty. Carrying on.
Do your talk. So just as a preface to this, we've talked about updating 7710 in the past, and in the absence of volunteers, Eric has worked with Warren to produce a biz document. And so I'll be assessing whether or not the group has consensus to adopt or what have you after this, but keep in mind this is something we've discussed in the past.
Let's see. All right, eat the mic. Okay. So these are all the changes from 7710 that I've been sort of slowly trickling in over the months. The things that we originally intended to do were clarify that IP string literals are in fact not recommended, that the URI option should be that of the captive portal endpoint, that captive portals may do content negotiation. I mean, we weren't aware of anybody actually using this option in the wild, but if they are, they might have used the captive portal option to be the HTML user interface URI. You can so there's some text about content negotiation in there, which we'll ask about later. I added text about captive portal URI precedents because we added another way to get the captive portal URI, and I thought maybe it was worth having some text to describe what to do in the event of a network configuration error. Maybe that text should just be something else.
Do you have an order of preference there? What's the order?
I had an order of preference in the document, yes. But what I did not do was choose an order of preference among address family specific things. So network, choose the option given to you by the network first, then choose the option given to you by the link relation, I think, or PBD rather, and then the link relation. But within the network specific things, I didn't order v4 before v6 or v6 before v4 or anything like that.
No, that's fine.
Let's see. We added this IETF, a request to the IONA to allocate this URN that says that you can put in place of the captive portal option instead of an HTTPS URL or something. You can just include this that says you should be free to go. And then in discussions with a captive portal vendor, they said it was hard in some cases to change the on-link infrastructure. They wouldn't want to change the DHCP infrastructure, and that it would be better if they could just intercept things, if they could continue to use the HTTP intercept and redirect and include something like a link relation header in there to indicate where the captive portal API was. So we added that, along with some text saying, don't ever interpret this in any other context except when deliberately probing for captive portals. So I'm not an HTTP person. I don't know if the content negotiation text looks reasonable. I don't know what people think about the order of precedence in the event of misconfiguration, or what other people would like to do if this is incomplete. I think most of the issues on the GitHub have basically been closed, except to make sure that the final diff from 7710 section is up to date. Has anybody read it? Does anybody have any thoughts? Does anybody like the font?
The slide.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, great.
What font is it?
I think Martin chose the font, I think.
Tommy Folly, Apple. So yeah, I have read the document. I think it's good. I think we should adopt it because we've discussed this before, and I think it's the right solution to this problem. I would also volunteer to kind of review it more in depth. I've read it and it's reasonable. I can do a more fine tooth combing of it as well as we have it as a working group document if we decide to do that.
Thank you.
I noticed that Mark Nottingham is sitting there. Would you be okay to look at the content negotiation text in here just to make sure it's sane? Okay, I'll do that. Thanks. And anyone else willing to throw their hat in terms of reviewing things? We now have quite a number of different mechanisms described in the one draft, all sort of fall into the same bucket. We've got DHCP, we've got RAs, we've got, this doesn't cover the PVD thing, but it does cover the interception cases as well. And so it would be good to have a look at it from a holistic level to make sure that the whole thing makes sense. Or the individual pieces make sense. So
Handicapped
Can we-
portal vendors?
anyone willing to stick their hands up for a read through of the document and email to the mailing list saying what you think? 30 minutes of your time. Yeah, Ted, thank you. See, look at this. We got him volunteering for all sorts of things. Thanks for that. I'll note that.
All
Let
right.
the minutes note that. Ted Lemon will be reviewing this document. Thank you.
Ted and Tommy. Thank you. There are blue sheets up here, by the way.
This one? Hang on. This one.
Darshak has also agreed to review.
Score. So unfortunately, we don't have our volunteer editors for the architecture draft with us today. There are a couple of issues that we might get time to discuss at the end. There are 5 open issues on the draft that I would like to have a little bit of a discussion about later on in the session. Unfortunately, Suresh is unable to join us either, so we'll see how that works out. But I think it's close. And again, we're going to need people to do the reviewing thing. So we'll make that request later once we've had a bit of a discussion about the open issues on the draft. And then I think we're going to Tommy. Look at that. Insert presentation here.
All right, I am Tommy. Darshak's not here in person, but I'm speaking for him also as a editor. We've done some updates to the API document. This should be pretty quick. Thank you. So I just want to cover what were the changes that we did make in the O2 version. We did add a terminology section. There was already a terminology section in the architecture document, but we wanted to extend it for the purpose of the API to say what are our clients in the API server specifically. We did some editorial passes to converge on calling things clients rather than hosts, because multiple things in this setup can be hosts, and it was unclear which ones were which. We added a consideration about whitelisting NTP. If you are trying to validate your certificates, you should probably have a way to validate your time on the network as well. That would be good. And there are some edits to the JSON keys that the API server can serve up. We had agreed last time to switch the notion of you are permitted on this captive network to flip the Boolean meaning to be you are captive. And we also added a vendor info URL. I think Darshak added that. We have some comments on clarifying that that we got from Kyle. So we got a nice, good review from Kyle, and so we're going to be updating those again. So the next steps that we have are to incorporate the review that we got recently, just this week. Other than that, it seems to be fairly stable. We'd love to get more reviews. We've done some implementation playing around, but it would be nice, I think, to get more concrete implementation experience. So if people have a captive portal setup that they would like to mock out, and I'd be happy to provide a client for that, and we can do some interop testing on that. I think that would be useful to do before we say, yes, we are done. But I think other than that, modular review, these documents are in pretty good shape. So other questions, comments?
So you have about 8 open issues on GitHub related to this.
Some of them are new-ish.
I think some of them actually you mentioned here, and I can see comments on them suggesting that they've been closed. So
Yeah, I can do a pass of those to make sure that any ones that we have fixed are closed.
how many? I see a couple of relatively recent. How many do you think we have open left? I see a couple of them are editorial, but
Yeah, a couple of them are.
you can bring it up on there.
Yeah, put them up. Let's do issue bashing. API. All right, so this first one is one of the very new ones that we got based off of Kyle's review, just to make it more in line with the architecture document. Eric opened one to update the JSON URL reference. Thank you for that. So we can do that very quickly. The vendor page URI is added, so that should be closed. We do want to add some more clarification text, so that will probably become a new issue. The NTP one is done. The bytes remaining, I think there were some comments still on that from Kyle's review, so I think our edits to the text there are not sufficient to clear up all things, so we'll probably want to do another pass at that. We did flip the permitted bit. We did add text around checking with the API again, and we don't require the user portal URL. So I think we have essentially like 4 issues left open after this.
One of the things I think was bytes remaining. I think we were going to talk about bytes remaining, layer 2 or layer 3. Did people have feelings about that? Yeah, discussed in the working group. Do people have preference for whether it should be layer 2 or layer 3 bytes? I mean, in theory, the host.
I think probably the main guiding point here would be if we have insight into what captive portals actually do for blocking. If they have data limits on your traffic, are they generally doing this in terms of which layer they're doing it? And if we are not sure, should we make that part of the name? Do we have any vendors here?
I think we can certainly say that it must be something that the device itself can count, right? That the device doesn't know what other sorts of tunneling overhead may be added as it wends its way through the network. But
It's Chris Seal. I don't know if it's relevant from an operator point of view. Captive portals also apply because if you've run out of credit, we would block until such time for prepay till you pay. But in that case, all the control plane would not count towards any byte count. It would be purely what the user sees in terms of the data. The bytes.
Can you define how you are splitting up the control traffic?
Well, they are. Okay. At your layer, you never see it. So there's a control plane for the signaling on a mobile network.
Sure.
And then there's tunneling, but the tunneling overheads are not counted as part of the bytes remaining. They are, because they're stripped before they actually get to the phone. They're only across the core network.
So if the client counts up the length of all of its IP packets, that should correlate to what you are considering to be user
Yeah,
data.
layer 3. I mean, yeah, user plane layer 3 would be what the user, what the UE sees.
But there is an issue with in-plane in-plane capture portal bytes, right? So in other words, the bytes that you send in order to interact with the capture portal periodically, do they count? Do they do not count? You need to be able to account for them separately,
Right.
or you're going to overcount, which is maybe also fine.
I would imagine that things that are whitelisted within the captive portal network should not count against the limits. And maybe we should add,
But the client
A
doesn't
note
know
for
what
that.
those things are necessarily.
well, we know the things that are intentionally to the captive portal API server itself, but you're right. Things that may be probes may or may not be categorized by the portal as user traffic, depending on how it's interpreted. So I guess I would. Do you have other inputs, please?
Yeah, Jean-Charles Argudecourt. I was thinking that if this is deemed to possibly be surfaced to the user in the UI, if it's layer 2, it's going to be completely impossible for the user to relate to, right? If I know I have 100 megabytes remaining and I want to do 90 megabytes download and it's layer 2 bytes, that doesn't help me at all.
I mean, layer 3 bytes don't necessarily help you a ton either, because that's not really the download of your file size, but I think it is much more practical. I believe, like when we show you the cellular data that you have used on your iPhone, that's going to be in terms of those packet counters. So I think that's something that people are used to seeing. So at this point, based on the feedback, I'd lean towards just saying we want to do layer 3 bytes and then have a comment about whitelisted traffic.
Ingress or egress?
Yes to both.
So the sum of both. This
I
matters because different networks meter these things differently.
Yeah, Eric Kinnear. I think what Eric said about it's better to overcount than to undercount. I'm not sure we can assume that an operator is actually properly whitelisting. Is properly not counting the things that are otherwise we would consider whitelisted. And it's unlikely to make a huge difference in what the user actually sees unless somebody's really nickel and diming.
I think it's the layer 3 is only one that really makes sense, because I don't think layer 2, for example, Wi-Fi, I don't think we actually know that information, because there's kind of X and all kind of extra stuff that is added there that you don't know about, or the management dissociation, association messages and so on. I don't know if actually the operating system gets information about how many bytes those are using, because most of them happens in firmware.
Right, you may or may not have it, yeah. Do we have any opinions about the ingress egress thing other than just saying we add the total? Is adding the totals sufficient? Okay, we have thumbs up. I think that's rough consensus.
Yeah, I get to say that. Yeah, it's rough consensus. You have your much. You have something to base this on. Anything else that we want to talk about? Do you want to see if there's another one that requires discussion here? That's done. That's done. That's done. That's done. That just needs to work. Yeah, I think the rest of them are largely editorial. So
I guess there was a bit of discussion around the vendor page URI, but I think that would potentially be better served by writing up some text and then sending it to the list as a pointer to a PR.
sounds reasonable. All right. Thanks, Tommy. Thank you. And I realized that I dropped the ball on the last one. Let's go back to the 7710 issue. I would like to at least get a sense of the room. Does anyone think that it's a bad idea to pursue this thing? I'd like to understand whether if when I send an email to the mailing list in the next little while, is anyone going to tell me that it was a terrible idea in a way that could have been much more succinctly expressed at the microphone? Okay, well, I might send that email now and we'll see. We'll give it a couple of weeks and see if people object. The fun part. Yeah. So you saw there that we have a number of minor issues on the API draft. I think the plan here is for Tommy and Darshak to work on the next revision of that document. And our hope is to do a working group last call based on that. Once that's out, we have a couple of issues, but I think the ones we've discussed are fine. Once you get the vendor URL thing going, we'll decide one way or other. The architecture draft has a number of issues as well. I don't know if we can just edit the URL and put architecture at the end. And I think there are 5 open issues there. One of them says DOE. Yeah, this is not making me feel happy. This is the set of issues that I would like to spend a little bit of time discussing here today. Because I think, based on the discussion that we've had, we either ship these things or we don't ship these things, and we can make that decision based on where we are now mostly. These issues I think we could get some insight on, but I think we have a couple of larger issues to discuss, and I think I put that in the slide deck. That was this one here. So it turns out this working group is another one of those places in the IETF where we're having this little bun fight that people like to call a tussle. There's a desire from Ted.
So Thomas Peterson asked me to ask at the mic, on the architecture diagram, is there any objection to including an annex on existing implementations? I am happy to attempt writing it regarding the DOE/CAPPORT discussion. And then he says, substitute diagram for document.
That sounds excellent. Thomas, if you could produce said text in the next couple of months, that would be maybe give us a commitment on time, and we can work out how to deal with that. I would like to, assuming that we decide to proceed, I would like to be able to proceed before we meet again.
Thomas is saying he'll do it this week. He'll try it this week.
Oh, that's amazing. That exceeds expectations. Thank you. So we have had several pieces of feedback that the simple yes/no signal that we have, and that I guess it's a little more than that now. We have sort of bytes that we're counting and time remaining, those sorts of things. We've had some signals from various folks that there's a lot more nuance that you could convey in the signaling from the network toward the client. And networks are clearly more complex. The question for the group is, are we comfortable saying that we're going to ship a simplification of this status, or do we think we need to say, well, networks need to be able to express the full range of different policies and status on what's going on? Do we need to split things out into egress bytes and ingress bytes, and do we need to say that you may go to the following destinations under the following conditions? I think that Nicola mentioned that there was a desire to express things in terms of the domain names that you might be contacting, for instance, for those networks that have policies around sites that you can visit. And obviously there's all sorts of rules that networks try to enforce about visiting adult sites and all sorts of other things that come into this discussion as well. The question for this group would be then, what's our level of comfort with providing a very reduced signal to the endpoints? We have effectively a Boolean switch in this protocol that says captive, not captive. Do we want to have some way for networks to be able to express more than that? Unfortunately, none of the people that have expressed a desire to do this are in this room. Does anyone have any interest in doing this now? We're establishing a means of communication between the network and the endpoints, and it's possible that we can extend this format. It's JSON. We can put whatever we want in there in the future, should we decide it's a good idea. Are people comfortable with that as an escape valve on this and proceeding with the very simple signals that we have right now? Or would they prefer that we block this effort on coming to some sort of resolution on these questions?
Gushabad Groves, yes. I'm more comfortable with the simple approach, the binary yes, no.
Can you
I don't
say a
think
little
we
bit
have-
more about why?
Yeah, I don't think we have good examples of why more information is necessary. And even if so, is it essential to the function of the captive portal signal? I don't think so.
So I might point out one of the arguments that's been another one of the arguments that's been presented in favor of a Boolean signal is that you have the ability to communicate with people using the web page. And that allows
Yes.
you a great deal of expression.
Yeah.
It's not machine readable, so it's not actionable in that sense, but you do have that opportunity.
The list of domain names that are permitted, even if you have not satisfied the captive portal conditions, can be just simply listed on the URI that you're presenting already. There's already a requirement that you need to have a web browser and that. So what else is necessary? I don't know.
We're not necessarily requiring that you have a web browser. Networks may be able to require that, but yes. The architecture more or less assumes that you have one, yes.
Tommy Polly. So not really commenting on this because I think I agree with the simple view. That's why we have what we have today. I agree that the outlet for this is that we can extend the keys in the future. Looking at the document, I realized that we don't define the mechanism for extension right now. The JSON keys are listed. They are not listed. It's not an IANA registry that we're creating. It doesn't specify anything about extension. So we can either leave it as is, but that's rather ambiguous. We can define a way to extend it without actually providing a registry, or we could define the registry with the current keys and the process for extending it, and that could be expert review or whatever we want there, such that if people need an outlet, especially if a captive portal vendor wants to add something that's a well-known thing and we get enough people wanting to do that, then we can actually add these in. I don't know what our thoughts are there.
So if we believe that extension is desirable, then I think we probably need to have an IANA registry. Otherwise, we'll end up with an uncoordinated mess. I already have. Okay. So now we have a few issues for Tommy to fix for us. Does anyone else want to speak onto this point? So one thing I'd like to do before we move on is get a sense of the room about moving forward with this plan and whether we should go with what we have and simply fix the issues that we have, which I think we just saw are relatively minor, or whether we need to go back and more fully engage on this topic so that we can come up with some answer to this question about networks telling devices that enter those networks more about the terms of their confinement, to use the terms from the charter. So I guess the first question will be, and I will ask people to hum because this is, even though that's silly, this is a relatively sensitive topic. The first question will be, should we proceed with the simple signal that we currently have? And the next question will be, we should continue to engage with finding a solution to more complex signals that will allow networks to express their policies more fully. Okay, so anyone who would prefer to proceed with the current simple signals, please hum now. Okay. Anyone who thinks that we need to continue to work on providing more nuanced and expressive ways for networks to express their policies, please hum now. I can hear the sirens in the background. That was pretty clear. The ayes have it, I guess, and we will proceed with what we have. I will confirm that on the list, of course, and hopefully once the editors of these documents have sorted out those few remaining issues, we'll talk about working group last call for those. If we do not do that by Montreal, some people will get some slaps and various other things. I think that it's probably pretty reasonable to expect that the changes that we reviewed for the API document can happen in a relatively short amount of time. And I don't know what Suresh's status is, but he's promised some time on this, and chairs will consult with him and make sure that we can get the last few issues on the architecture updated. And of course, if Thomas provides us with extra text, that's just gravy. So great. Okay, well, short and sweet. And AOB. Thank you, everyone. You have the rest of your time to yourselves. Go do something productive. Oh, what is the front name? OVO. OVO. It's on Google Slides. It's a very important piece of business there from Adam. You like it, right?
Yeah, it's like a mix between like Bookman and the sort of old timey font they use for the interstitial silent films. Doesn't have that nice
Yeah, we can work on that.
Thank you all. If you haven't signed the blue sheets, please do. Does anybody know where the blue sheets are?
So Adam, the other one you want to look at is Garamond.
Blue
Pretty
sheets?
common one.
Yeah.
Go floating around. If anyone hasn't signed the blue sheets, please do so now, and make sure they get to the chairs, please.
I'll run them down.
Yeah, thank you. I might go to a different session.
No, I've anybody else need to sign? Sure, I guess.